have always, like, it's befuddled me that, like, from a collecting standpoint, the defensive players don't gain the traction that they likely should. Because if you look at quarterbacks, why they're collectible, they have long careers, and those that are good, everybody knows them. It's the same thing on defense.
This is Good Sellers, a podcast for collectors who want to learn how to sell the cards they don't want so they can get their hands on the cards they need. In every episode, we uncover the secrets collectors use to move their cards so you can sell more and sell faster. Let's get started.
Hey, this is JB. I'm the CEO of Stack and your host for this episode of Good Sellers. Good Sellers is brought to you by Stack, an app where you can run and launch Stack sales directly from your phone. Using Stack, collectors will claim what they want from your sale, and then Stack will automatically reconcile who claimed what, send out your totals, collect payment, and create the labels so that after a sale, all you have to do is hit print and drop your package at the post office. Well, first off, as we start today, I know I said we were going to do a follow-up to the break episode, and we will. But like many of you listeners, the vast majority of the guests that I have on this show do this as a hobby. And the guest for the follow-up episode just started a new job. So I'm letting him settle in there a bit, and we'll be back with the breakdown episode in a few episodes from here. But today I have not only a guest that I'm excited about, but a topic that I'm super excited about. When I first got into cards as a kid, and I've talked about it on this podcast, my first and now favorite ever set was 1994 Marvel Flair. A few years back, I started buying unopened boxes of 94 Flair. I mean, I was buying them strictly for nostalgia purposes, and I realized quickly that the cards were in great shape. The packs themselves are actually individually in a pack that's inside of a box, inside of the hobby box, which protected them really well from 1994. So I started grading those cards that had extremely low pop because it's Marvel, it's like an offshoot set. And so not only were they low pop with PSA, but they were gemming at a really good rate, and I made quite a few bucks off of that set. And the entire time I was doing that, I really enjoyed my induction back into Marvel cards with our guest today, Nick Martin. Nick is one of my favorite, and I call him an oddball collector. I don't know if you identify yourself as this, Nick. But Nick's collection includes but isn't limited to defensive players in the NFL. He's an Aaron Donald super collector. He's one of the biggest guys that I know in Fortnite cards. He collects Marvel just like I do. And I'm not sure really what else. I'm sure we'll talk about it today. But without delaying it any further, Nick, welcome to Good Sellers.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Oddball's probably fair. I probably use the term niche.
Okay.
Makes it so I don't come off as the oddball that I already am. So,
all right. Well, I'll refer to it as niche collecting in the episode, but let's talk about it, and let's talk about what you collect. So you're always, and one of my favorite things in just talking with you, usually over Twitter DM, is that you're trying to push the envelope on untapped markets or underappreciated sets or players. So let's just start out, not niche. Let's start out pretty broad. Talk to the audience just a little bit about what you collect.
Yeah. So as a late 30s individual, the heart of my collecting was the mid 90s until probably about 2000. Like that's where like distinct memories are. I left the hobby for about 10 years. And when I came back into it, it looked a lot different. And for me, it was just collecting football cards. It was funny because I actually never collected football cards when I was younger. It was basketball only. And coming back into football was everything. The Rams I'm a Rams fan, by the way. The Rams had a couple really good draft classes, or what thought were going to be good draft classes. So I was like, I want to collect cards. And it gave me a hobby to kind of dive into. Within that, 2014 was when I really got into it. And breaking was kind of at like this. It wasn't in its infancy stage anymore. It was a little bit more mainstream. And so I was playing with inside of that. And I stumbled upon Blowout Forums probably in like 2012 and was introduced to Houdini, who ran breaks on that site at that time. And he had 50 case Topps Chrome break for players. And I was like, this is perfect. Like I'm going to go chase two different players with inside of this break. It was relatively cheap, and from an entertainment perspective, if you've ever broke a case of Topps Chrome, it's not quick. It takes a long time. So 50 cases was going to give me like 3 weeks of enjoyment, so I could justify it. And so within that, the Rams had Aaron Donald. They had drafted Aaron Donald that year. And so I bought his auto spot, his non-auto spot, and it was a cheap entertainment piece for me. And so that was like really like thrust back in the hobby. That's like specific instance, break, etc. And I, over time, was like, all right, I'm just going to collect Aaron Donald. And that's really what I did. I didn't buy a ton of other things until probably about 2017. I started to play in the space a lot bigger. I was really attracted to niche things. Aaron Donald defensive players is a niche thing. If you collect football cards right now and you go look at anybody's I'm in search for it, who has Herbert, who has Mahomes, who has Brady, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm the opposite of groupthink in everything I do in life, in business, in friendships, no matter what. Like I try to do the opposite. Maybe I'm a contrarian at heart. And so collecting defensive players, to me, I enjoy that side of the football, or in a football game, I enjoy that side of the game. I got really, really lucky that I just so happened to collect what is probably the greatest modern defender. And what turned into a hobby then started to materialize itself into a revenue stream, because I don't even know how many base Topps Chrome Aaron Donalds I hit out of 50 cases, but it was probably 40. And at the time they were sold for $6, $7, $8 a piece. When the hobby kind of came storming back 3-4 years ago, they were up to $100 a piece. And all the way at one point, they were at like $350 a piece raw. And so I was like, well, I can go print money now through Aaron Donald's. And the hobby has evolved a lot. I think in the past 4 years, but even more so in probably the past 10. In 2014, Prism was new. Everyone hated it, me included. I didn't buy any Prism. I bought Topps Chrome. I liked it. I liked Topps product. It was on card. It's what I know. It's what I knew. In 1996, like I have vivid memories of going down to, there's the card shop here in town, or used to be, it was called Gold and Silver Exchange. And I remember going in and I had a birthday, but they had a laser tag place down the road. I got like $80, rode my bike down there. I bought a box of Topps Chrome, and like that was the set for me. So that was kind of the intro into, I guess, niche stuff. I've stumbled and got lucky where he is concerned, but with that, I felt like there's always been like this conflicting force with me inside of the hobby that has said like, as a football fan, like remove the hobby aside. Football fans, most of the time, like quarterbacks, and then they like whoever's really good on defense. And I have always like, it's befuddled me that like from a collecting standpoint, the defensive players don't gain the traction that they likely should. Because if you look at quarterbacks, why they're collectible, they have long careers. And those that are good, everybody knows them. It's the same thing on defense. Defensive players don't have shelf lives like running backs. Ray Lewis plays for how many years? I think he got drafted in 97 and played till 2015. Like, long career. Julius Peppers played till he was 38. Like, it still to this day doesn't make sense to me. But there's a lot of research that then goes inside of that, especially during the hobby boom itself, if we want to coin it that. All right, if people are going to play in this space, what are they attracted to? What are the attributes that need to be true for someone to either collect it or to see value in it? And so that kind of propelled me to all of the other streams that you mentioned before of niche / oddball stuff that I like to collect. I like the research part of it. By day, I work in corporate America. I work in retail, and data is something I make a lot of decisions off of. I leverage that with inside of cars and cards. And I look to see what people want and what they're after outside of the mainstream stuff.
So what kind of data what kind of data points would you look into? So you mentioned, okay, you're looking at an NFL athlete's how long they stay dominant, right? You used the Ray Lewis example. He played for 15 plus years. In the Julius Peppers one, is that what you mean by the data that you're evaluating? Or is there other data that goes into what you decide to collect? Because, for example, and what I'm going to get into shortly is like Fortnite cards. I mean, you can't say that Fortnite has either a long, it's been around, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years at this point, but there's not as detailed data over time. And also it's very different than Ray Lewis's time in the NFL, the decision to go after Fortnite cards. So what are those data points that you're looking into when you decide what to collect?
Yeah. And I think that broadly there's a couple things. So, but it all starts with one precipice. That is is speculation, right? Like everything that we do, like the attraction to rookie cards is that there's a new rookie that's coming out this year. I think that he is going to be X, Y, and Z. We do it with quarterbacks every single year, right? When they come out. And for me, there's a lot of things that need to be true. For quarterbacks specifically, they need to win Super Bowls. And so if I'm going to buy a quarterback, I have to have conviction that they are going to win Super Bowls. Current state right now, I would not buy a single quarterback in the AFC outside of Patrick Mahomes because they have to win multiple Super Bowls. And I think that for them, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, you go through that list, it's going to be hard because they're competing against each other. They're all really, really, really good. And so Super Bowls, I think, matter. Projection is where I start with. The second piece of that then is the collectability of that. And so the attributes is what team do they play for? What do they do from a stat perspective that will say that, hey, anybody can look at this person and they are defined as good, right? In football, you can be good and not stuff the stat sheet. I think people get pretty glued into a box score. And so I don't agree with it, but I will play into that because that's what the market is going to look like. So, okay, someone that they're going to have high sacks, they're going to win lots of defensive player of the year awards. Do they win a championship? But then do they play at a good market? For me, the past couple of years, Micah Parsons has been a play that I have a lot of conviction in because once Aaron is gone, I think that it's going to be him and maybe two other guys that are going to be vying for defensive player of the year's awards. Not only that, he's probably plays for the most popular team in the world. And they might be good enough to win a Super Bowl. So he's going to check those boxes, or at least I hope so. So there's a projecting piece of this with everything that I do that I hopefully can get there and it makes sense. On the other side of that is sales and eyeballs. You want to follow the trend. I hopefully have started some trends with Aaron Donald stuff. I normally don't like to talk about sales broadly, but like I sold a McDonald's or a pretty big McDonald's in the spring. And I pushed it hard on social media because I wanted the eyeballs to get there. I wanted everybody to see how it was. I knew it was going to perform. It candidly came in a couple $1,000s short than I thought it was going to be. And just for transparency, I listed my 2014 Prism Finite Auto BGS 995 True Gem with PWCC. I made the decision with my collection that I didn't want those autos anymore, for his 2014 Prism autos. And so I had full rainbow. The best way to let go of rainbow is let go of the 101. And so I let that one rip first. And it did 29,000 with BP, buyer's premium, for layman's terms. It came in a couple $1,000s less than I thought it was going to be. I actually had an offline offer a couple weeks before the Super Bowl that was at 40. I said no. And the only reason I said no is that it was the only card of that magnitude that had an opportunity to sell. And at the given time, I was like, I'm going to write it out to the Super Bowl and I want to see what it does. I don't want to be the person that sells it for 40,000. Someone has the stones to then go up and put it up at a big auction house and it does 100 and then me kick myself. So I was willing to risk that. And from there, it then gave me a really good baseline to understand where to rank stack everything else and make some decisions on what I was going to let go and what I was going to hold. So back to the data question, there's a lot of things. There's sales, there's eyeballs, there's volume of sales. I think volume matters. If you're going to play the space that, only one big card sells every 6 months, then you need to understand that like your approach with that then is you're going to have some patience. I had a lot of patience with this. Like it took me almost 8 years to sell some of the stuff that I had because that's where I felt like was a mature standpoint to sell it from. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, for sure. And I like the idea of, how much people want to buy matters. One of the reasons that I dove so deep into Marvel was, okay, this was a set that I was having fun. It wasn't even just a set, just Marvel cards in general. If we talk about, okay, I think you're a few years older than I am, but still same general time frame. My first cards were in the mid 90s. And I remember going to Blockbuster and they had an open hobby box of Marvel Flair. And so for me, there was a lot of nostalgia there. And so I thought it would be fun to start collecting that just for fun for myself. And I remember I subbed bulk to PSA, got back a big order, and was like, all right, I'm going to sell half of this, keep half, whatever. And I went to Twitter with it, and it was one of the fastest sales that I had ever seen for myself on Twitter, which was I was putting a card up, and I'm like, okay, it's a PSA 9 or whatever, selling kind of the lower end stuff. for between $15 and $30 a piece. And these things, people were commenting take within 5 seconds. There were 6 comments. And then I was like, wow, this seems like there might be an opportunity here. And it's not just me who's the one who's into this, but that there's actually a good, I don't know what term you used, but the amount of eyeballs or people who are interested, the volume of sales was there. Like, people wanted this stuff. And so I kept diving deeper and deeper into it until I basically hit my like precipice, if you will, which was like Steve Aoki buying a base PSA 10 for like $900. I was like, all right, I win. Like, I think this is probably where this is going to cap out after I'd done like, the boxes were like 260 cards and I'm grading half of them, and I did like 5 boxes. I mean, that's a lot of cards from PSA. I think after that, I was like, all right, I'm kind of tapped out on this. I had my fun. But that volume thing, I think, really matters when you're talking about going into these niche spaces, because if you do go collect something that is niche, but you're the only one who's into it, you might get stuck holding the bag. So I want to pivot to not sports cards,
Sure.
and something that I think I find fascinating that you do. I'm talking about Marvel, and this is pretty similar, but I think, one of the biggest plays of your collecting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, outside of AD was Fortnite cards. So talk to me a little bit about that. How did you decide that Fortnite cards were something that you wanted to get into?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. The premise of buying and selling and collecting and understanding all of those things, the best part is it's transferable between every genre that you want. Marvel's was the perfect opportunity, and the past 3 years was the perfect storm for it to actually come into fruition, because everybody knows every Marvel character. Everybody. You don't have to collect cards. Everybody knows. You could go from 3 years old to 80 years old. Everyone knows who Iron Man is. Like, you go through the list, Spider-Man, etc. And so the fact that there was cards to actually play with inside of that space made it a very, very ripe opportunity. Now take that, and you can say that there's this massive known base of people that know what it is. Fortnite is a projection of that. I think anybody that's in this hobby in a larger magnitude has a reliable ear that they lean on, whether that's, hey, like, what do I do with this play? And they have the sounding board. I have one. I actually met him on Blowout Forums in 2012, buying a Stedman Bailey Topps Chrome Auto. And we became really good friends. And I think that we both trust each other enough to use each other as sounding boards. So anyways, 2019, the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, he comes to me. He's like, this is my most recent play. And I was like, all right, elevator pitch me on it. And he does. And I was like, it makes a ton of sense. I don't play Fortnite. I love first person shooters. I don't like ones where I got to build a castle and kill somebody.
The irony of you not playing the game.
So this is the best part about this, though, is that most of the people that collect Fortnite cards or big holders of it don't play the game, which to me actually reinforces my opinion on the play itself. But so Fortnite has at its peak had 500 million users globally. So he comes to me and says, hey, Fortnite Series 1 came out about 8-9 months ago. Here are all of the things you need to know. And it was like stripping all of my hobby knowledge down to the bare bones again, and like trying to relearn parallels. Like if someone joined the sports hobby today and you told them like, hey, you can go buy Select and you can go pull this card, but there's going to be 67 different parallels for it. And each one of them have a different amount of importance, and important then correlates to cost. Fortnite was the exact same thing. He's like, all right, so they printed Series 1 in 3 different countries. They printed it in the USA, they printed it in Brazil, and they printed it in Italy. He's like, USA is the most desired, and here is why. And so that's really all I needed from like a point my nose in the right direction. To me, it logically made sense that like there is a demand, or there will be a potential demand there based off of the eyeballs that are to the game itself. Pokemon's another thing, right? Like Pokemon, I think that's probably where you can draw the parallels at, is that Pokemon was popular from a TV show and a game, and the cards were important at the beginning because it was a game. But now probably isn't as much so. I don't know of a lot of people that collect a lot of Pokemon that are like, hey, let's go build a deck and duke it out. Like, I know, I just don't.
The TCG's still Still pretty big. I mean, between probably that and Magic the Gathering are the most popular. But
Right.
I think it adds. I think the point you're making is it adds another layer to importance of the cards,
Absolutely.
where they stay relevant in
Mhm.
pop culture because people are actually playing the card game and collecting the
Totally.
cards. So it's kind of they play off of each other.
Correct. And I think that that's probably will be the inherent advantage that Pokemon has to every other game that comes out, other than maybe Lorcana when it actually fully releases. I'm a big believer in that one. If you don't know what that one is, that's Disney's TCG that's coming out. It's going to be banging. I have a PSA 10. I have a PSA 10 Elsa that my daughter comes into my office every single day, and she's like, "Can I have this?" And I'm like, "You absolutely cannot have that. You can have it, but
You look
yeah,
at it,
yeah,
it's
exactly."
sonically sealed in my PSA 10, but
Mhm.
it doesn't leave the office.
Yeah. So, okay. So back to Fortnite. So Fortnite was, here's my direction. This is what's good. For those of you who don't know what they are, there's not a trading card. Like they are just a skin. It's a picture of the skin and that's it. When they released series one, they released weapons, skins, and then they have skins are the same as they are in the game based off of their rarity. And then desirability comes off of their rarity. And so I was like, all right, what do I buy? So I buy a USA, I rip a bunch of it, pulled a bunch of hollows, created some of them. And then he's like, hey, he's like, Italy stuff isn't as desirable, but he's like, it's way cheaper than the USA counterparts for sealed wax. He's like, what are your thoughts there? And I was like, honestly, I was like, let's take a couple swings at it and see how we do. And so I bought 10 mega boxes. So for Fortnite, there's no hobby well, there is a hobby version, but it sucks. Retail was king with Fortnite. They came out with mega boxes and they were Target exclusives in year one.
And we all watched them sit there for
They were 20.
months and months. And I remember going early in the boom and, they didn't have any, 2019-20 NBA Prism and it was an L and you saw the Fortnite cards there and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I don't want that.
Yeah.
That
So-
garbage.
Fortnite mega boxes they retail for $19.99. In
Hurts a little bit.
May of 2021, they were selling for $4,500 regularly. And that price point was driven by one card. There was a private sale that happened for a Black Knight Crystal Shard. So a Crystal Shard was like a bonus pack that was in mega boxes. You got 2 of them. For any of you that collect sports, they are cracked ices. They just called them something different in year one. But there was a main chase skin. It's called Black Knight. There was a private sale that happened for like $55,000. It was documented by this guy. He's prominent on Facebook. He's also on Twitter, but no one knows who he is. I do, but he goes incognito. But then Steve Aoki started ripping him on his chin. And he called out that he bought a BK, Black Knight. And then it was like gasoline on an already semi-raging fire. And then it was off to the races. I mean, skins that were selling for $400 or $500 we're now selling for $3,500 for $7,000. But the best part about Fortnite is that everybody that was early on it didn't collect cards. They were Fortnite purists. And so for me and a couple of my buddies that were really into this, we took everything that we knew about sports and brought it over to Fortnite and said, like, we're going to grade the shit out of this stuff. I know some really precise numbers. So when I'm saying them, I'm not just pulling shit out of my ass. I literally remember when it happened. I sent my first sub. So back to buying Italy stuff. Buy Italy stuff. I pulled a Black Knight, and it
Was it the cracked ice?
It was cracked ice.
Shard, I think.
Yeah, they're crystal shards. Which
Crystal shards,
to make it even more confusing, in Italy they called them hard lemonades, but
Oh.
euros. They're weird.
Okay.
So I pull one. Grade it, comes back as a 10. I sent 7 cards. At the time, there was only 891 cards in pop, period, across base, hollow, and crystal shards.
Because this was PSA shut down. You were sending at what, like 200? Because I remember
$300 a piece.
$300 a card, right? Yeah. So like you better be sure of what you're sending in. Because I remember you doing it. I didn't know all of this data behind it, but fascinating.
So pop was super low. I sent in 7 cards. So I just increased pop by almost 1%. I sent in 7 cards and they all ginned. As soon as I got them back that day, I posted the BK on eBay for 50 grand. That is just shy of what the USA sold for. And it was a big number. I was like, man, if I get 15 for this, I'm going to be pumped. But it was pop one. I posted on eBay. I posted on Twitter. and I posted on my IG. And I'm not lying, within 2 hours, I had an offer on eBay for 35 grand for it. I was like, what? Like,
And
dude,
in
this,
typical collector fashion, you went, "Ooh, if that came in 2 hours, what would happen?" No, I don't know.
yeah, no, I like, yes and
Did you
no.
take it?
Yes, but
Okay, all right.
the better part of the story is as soon as that offer came in, about 30 seconds later on my IG, I get a message from somebody I don't know. I'd never seen him on IG before. And it was like, hey, I saw that you have a BK. What is your number on it? And I was like, all right, the coincidence of me getting an offer and then someone hitting me up on IG is it's likely the same person. So I was like, hey, did you send this offer on Instagram? And he's like, yes. I was like, that number off of eBay, we're good. And he's like, sweet. He goes, shoot over your wire number. And this was on like a Friday afternoon. And so he's like, it's not going to clear until Monday. And so we agreed to it. Yes. And I wake up Monday morning, 6 o'clock. I roll over in my bed and I flip over my phone and there's a notification from Wells Fargo. And I was like, holy shit. All right. This is real. Let's do this. And then I was all in at that point because I'm free rolling. Like I could miss and I'm still on the upside. So from that point, it was like 4 or 5 months of frenzy where it was, I'm buying raw, I'm grading, and I'm making a 10x premium on everything and we just rinsed and repeated over and over and over again. And I was taking $300 grading fees on the chin left and right, and I didn't care. In the back of my head, I was like, man, my write-off for just grading fees alone this year is going to be wonderful. So it was easy to justify it.
Well, and the beauty of the $300 grading fees probably kept you propped up longer than if grading fees and the setup was what it is today, which is you can sub value $19 a card is I think their new pricing for the new year, and you're going to get your cards back in about a month. The $300, it's almost like the gate and the more expensive grading allowed you to continue to dominate the market.
Totally. And most of the people that were new to it, if they were new and they dabbled into both sports cards and Fortnite, a lot of them, like PSA was great at the beginning of the hobby boom, but like there was still this like 60-40 split where people sent a lot of stuff to BGS. And so a lot of the OG people with inside of Fortnite had a lot of stuff at BGS. And so,
and then PSA was pretty much closed.
And PSA was closed. So the barrier to entry to getting PSA slots was incredibly, incredibly tough.
And I remember you doing all of this and talking to me about it. And as someone on the outside who didn't get free rolled into it, I understood what you were saying, but it was too much risk for my appetite. I was like, Nick, you're nuts. Enjoy your $300 grading fees. It sounds like you're crushing it. But for those reasons, I'm out. And, I stand by that, right? Like it's risk. And in a lot of situations, when you have the ability to get into something early, well, then later it makes you able to play with more.
Yeah. But the best part about this though, is that the Fortnite is as corrected just as everything has. But there's a guy on Instagram called Pancake Analytics, I think. He just wrote up this massive write-up on Fortnite specifically. And the amount of market share that Fortnite has gained. And so since then, there's been 2 new releases. There's been Series 2 and Series 3, and print runs have obviously scaled as each release has come out. But the average sale on Black Knights on all 3 of his parallels, base, hollow, and crystal shards, they've only eroded 2.5% from peak to now. And to me, like that means that like people that are buying are bag holders and they value it and they are going to stuff it away because they believe in it. And I think that honestly, the collecting base could be what it is today and not grow ever again. And these cards will still continue to have incremental value over time because those that have less than desirable skins, if they're 15, 16 years old and in 20 years, they finally want a BK. Great. I've got one of the 9. So
you still have one?
Yeah. So actually, I kind of diluted myself in the probably later summer of 2021. I got rid of the bulk of stuff that I had and started to pivot it back into other things that were just a little bit more productive and I could kick the flywheel off a little bit faster. But I carved back in at the beginning of this year because I felt like there was an opportunity. Mega boxes got cheaper. Crystal shards started to pop up a little bit. As soon as inflation started to come, those that didn't have a ton of money started letting stuff rip a little bit. And like, I felt bad because people needed to sell them to pay bills, but I also needed a buying opportunity for me. So I carved back in a very, very big way. And then SGC 95 popped up on PWCC in August. I was like, I'm going to take it to auction to like 15. And then if I can get it there, I'm happy. If not, I'm out. It looked like a PSA 8 at best. But then in the beginning of October, a PSA 9 popped up on eBay for like 15 and a half. It was really, really clean. And I was like, yep, I smashed bin. And yeah, I'm holding it. I'm going to crack it and resub it. It's 10 worthy, but yeah. So Fortnite for me, it's a long play. There's definitely opportunities that ebb and flow throughout time, and I'll take advantage of them when I see them. There's things that I have a lot of conviction in. There's some that I really like, and I just from a PC perspective, I like Viking type stuff, and so there's a couple skins that look like that, and so I like those, and I will just keep them. But the play in itself was there's a huge base of people that like this game. They're probably really young. In time, if cards continue to be mainstream, and I have a lot of faith that fanatics will put cards in every place that you could ever imagine to where the dots start to connect themselves, and over time it pays off.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about what you talked about there is that the churn in the market for the high-end cards and even just a lot of the cards wasn't as much as you see in some other things. And I'm going to use an example here. You looked at Fortnite and you were like, look, this is extremely popular with a younger generation and in pop culture. Something that separately I heard a lot about early on that I hated, and the audience may not like this, was F1. I believe that F1 was artificially pumped up because of a Netflix series, and that it didn't have a real fan base in the United States. And for those of you out there, yes, people collect cards around the world. Other cultures are not nearly as obsessed with their things as Americans are. And despite how much we try and make soccer cards, soccer is a bigger sport universally than the NFL is or what have you, I didn't believe that F1 was going to hold. And it hasn't. You watch the biggest of big F1 cards have taken like a 90% plummet. And so for me, I'd be curious your thoughts on it of when looking into, and at that time when F1 cards first started with Topps Chrome and their Sapphire, which was a humongous release, maybe the most like to the moon. Yeah, we never seen anything that took off like F1 took off. Yeah. So I would just be curious, what the differences are that you see in how the Black Knight has held despite the economy and what have you, while, the biggest of big Lewis Hamilton cards are, I don't know enough about like Max Verstappen and where his cards are exactly, but from what I've gathered, they've not held the same way that Fortnite is. So I'm just curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, well, and I think those two things are a little bit unique. One, F1 will forever be slotted in the sports lane. People will view them as that. And only because when cards came out, we were conditioned to say that like, there is a rookie card. This is someone's first card. This is the first release. I think the rise in wherever it's at right now, it was partially due to timing. At the time, Lewis Hamilton was at the peak of his career. But he was also getting ready to hand the baton off to a young kid that was going to take over and now be the new face of it. And so the fact that it is max or die right now with inside of that, I think probably hurts it. Not only that, like you've got 3 years of product now, and really they only have 3 offerings. You have Dynasty, you have Chrome and all of the variations with inside of it, and then base paper. And for me, for F1, like they're going to need to have more offerings to give different tiers and then figure out a way to have value with inside of that, whether that's game use or the equivalent to game use and whatnot. I think with Fortnite, why it's different is one, I don't think it was as force fed into culture. I think it was organically built into culture. The fact that you've got prominent NFL players doing iconic dances from the game every single time that they score a touchdown will forever have this relationship to the game itself. The other thing with inside of that is that a banana skin, there's no, like, it doesn't go out of style, was never in style. Like it is what it is, but it's iconic because of the game. And as long as the game stays salient with inside of the customer base, and or not even customer base, but people that just know about it, I think it will still have a lot of relevancy. I think the backbone to the entire play, though, is that Epic Games, you have to look at, like, can that game survive itself or survive for a long time? Because if Fortnite died today, like, it would be like this point in time where it was like, hey, that was a really cool game. It was really, really relevant. And then that was it. For me,
Which is like Pokemon, right? Like Pokemon will never die.
totally,
It will be something for kids and adults because every set of kids is getting introduced to it and they're going to find it interesting again when they're in their mid-30s like I am. And I have a first edition Charizard, like, and it's my favorite card that I own, So I think that, anyway, continue. But
yeah, no,
there are a lot of similarities.
I think that there has to be something that says that, hey, like, Epic Games and Fortnite is going to be around for a while. And if you look at everything that's happened with them, they went around, they got a ton of money, and they said, hey, we are going to put a ton of money behind opening up a real world to the next gen of Web 2.0, and Fortnite is going to be at the center of that. And not only that, like, I can look around at everything else that Epic Games has touched, and they've turned it into gold. And so you're banking on a couple things. You're banking on that, hey, does Epic Games have their shit together to where they're going to continue to scale this? And then two, our card company is going to continue to make it. Series 3 releasing this last summer was massive because it showed that Panini themselves said that, hey, this is a viable enough product that I want to continue doing this. But then they also printed it into oblivion and released it to Target and Walmart. And so it's everywhere. You can go buy S3 Megas and there's a chase card with inside it. They put a top 3 skin in the game of all time in that. And so there's a desirability to it. And so, like, all of those factors to me is like, now I'm sitting here like licking my chops, like, does season 4 come out? Because every release is going to bring in new entrants in with inside of the hobby. And every time it does that, how it comes is that there's a kid that buys it. Their dad collects sports cards. Their dad then has an ego and says, I want the biggest and baddest card within inside of it. And they go and they say, hey, what should I buy? They jump on this massive Facebook room that exists for Fortnite cards. And they're like, oh, it's Black Knight, it's Peely, it's Skull Trooper. And they go buy them. And then every single time one of those instances happens, here the 4 now gets rose on the biggest cards within his set. So that's kind of the thought process behind it. On some things, I'll be a long-term bag holder. And then I've identified a couple places right now where they're money printers. They are the 91 Impel normals where you can go rip a bunch, create a bunch of volume, and your ROI on the total investment is awesome. You have to have some patience just because the collecting base is smaller. You have to be flexible. I've made more trades in Fortnite than I have in anything else by a long shot, but it's a fun space for me. I don't find it gets stale. And to me, that's super exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I just find it super interesting. And I was trying to connect some dots there with just like something about, what you've mentioned when it comes to, the volume of buyers and interest. I think that there's a lot, when you're looking into these things to evaluate that viability of something that, do I just think it's cool, or are there not only going to be people who also think it's cool, but then is there going to be a market for cards for that thing? And I think, that may be the difference between this, aside from one being sports and one being Fortnite, but that might be the difference between a Fortnite and an F1. Is F1 in the United States going to maintain that audience that it has? And is Fortnite? And it sounds like Fortnite's continuing to maintain that, which I think is pretty exciting for you and why you dove back in with some big cards.
And with F1, like, there's the opportunities there, right? Like, we get Vegas this year, and anybody that doesn't acknowledge how big of a deal that is, having an F1 race on the strip in Vegas is going to be the most premier event with inside of that entire circuit. It will be, at least for the first couple of years until maybe the shine loses itself. Mm-hmm. But what Topps does with that opportunity, I think, is going to be, I'm looking forward to it. If I'm Topps, like, I figure out a way to where I have a pop-up shop down there that is, race event released only, and it re-sparks some interest with inside of it, because it only takes a certain part of the hobby to kickstart it in the butt. And so I'm looking forward to that opportunity. I got sucked into the Netflix, watch it and binge it. And I enjoyed it. I really, truly did.
A lot of people did. And I think
Yeah.
that's why those cards took off the way that they did, unlike anything that I
Yeah.
personally have ever seen. A new product of pretty much a new sport. I think they have had some cards in the past. And I mean, it went about as sky high as you can get off out of the gates.
Yep. Agreed.
Which then opens it up as anything to come back down to earth, either a little or a lot, and it looks like a huge crash. Another thing I'd be curious about, and you probably don't have the answer to this, and I don't either, but when you're referring to the race is, I heard for like 2 years from soccer collectors that when the World Cup happened, that their cards were going to take off because soccer started in a similar way, got really popular, then came back down to earth, and then there was an event that was happening very similar to F1. And
Yep.
I'd be interested at some point to have a soccer collector come onto this show to talk about, did that actually, and I don't know if you know, like, did that actually happen during the World Cup? Did that event that happens once every 4 years that was supposed to be the premier soccer event in the world, did that actually spike the cards, or was it a minor, we got a little more interest, a couple guys go off and what have you?
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to hear about that as well.
Well, I think the World Cup probably got really, really lucky, right? They had the iconic old head like reaches the mountaintop, right? He does something that it puts a crown on his career. And then you also have the equivalent to Patrick Mahomes. The
Mhm.
kid lights the world on fire and was amazing in the last World Cup, comes to this World Cup and does the unthinkable over and over and over again. I think they got really, really lucky. I do know a little bit of how the markets reacted. I've got a couple buddies that are huge into soccer, and they're like, "Hey, you want to watch this?" And I was like, "I would rather watch paint dry than watch a soccer."
And
But
my question is really around, and maybe my question is really around, okay, not about Mbappe and about Messi. I get it.
Yeah.
Messi, he won the World Cup. I'm sure his stuff went up. It can only go up so much more, but I'm
Yeah.
sure it had a nice little pop. And then Mbappe performed again on the
Right.
greatest stage. But my question is, like,
Right.
and we're talking about the Vegas race, right? Like, is Max Verstappen stuff going to be of interest? For sure. I'm more curious, like, did the sports cards as a whole have any implication? The guys who maybe scored a couple of goals, the young kids who maybe got more playing time than they were used to getting on the grand stage, like, did that happen? The rookies from the last 2 to 3
Totally.
years, did those guys get any sort of appreciation in the soccer hobby? I'm very curious there.
My gut says probably no. I think
Yeah.
the sentiment around cards is that like it's sinking, and how far is it going to sink? That's my assumption, is that money ran to save money, but I think that's the right thing right now. Across, it doesn't matter about genre of cards. It's like if you were going to have money with inside this hobby, you put it into the most stable place you possibly can. We've seen in sports cards where base prisms are back to earth, even silvers back to earth, as they should be. They shouldn't. Like they should have never reached the levels that they did, but they did because volume wasn't there to meet demand. And so demand found a new channel to drive itself off of. I think that's likely is like the overcorrecting or recorrecting is probably here, and it's going into the places that it needs to be. Messi, Mbappe, et cetera.
Yeah.
Maybe Holland. But yeah, Fortnite though is probably immune to a lot of that stuff, candidly. Like one skin may not, like there's going to be a priority of favoritism probably from visibility and nostalgia. But the cool thing about Fortnite cards is that like your favorite skin and my favorite skin and some other favorite skin, they're probably all different, and they're different for different reasons. I don't play the game, so I found the one that I thought looked the most badass. He's Viking looking skull dude. And I was like, yeah, he's cool looking. I actually, my card Yoda is what I call him, the guy who got me into Fortnite. I sent him, can I have props on this show?
Yeah. The audio folks will just describe it
Yeah.
too. It's going to be video and audio, so you can just talk about what you're holding up as well.
Yeah. So there's some Fortnite skins they've got different backgrounds based off of the color of the card themselves. And I got this card in a trip. It's Deadfire. It's a BGS 9.5 Crystal Shard. And I sent him a picture of it, and I was like, I honestly think that the lime green Crystal Shards from Series 1, they pop the most. And I was like, I'm attracted to them just because of the way they look aesthetically. And so I think that there's a lot of things with inside of Fortnite that's how the collectability comes, just how from visual appeal. And so for all of those reasons is why I'm I'm a long-term bull on Fortnite.
Yeah. And it's the same with me with Marvel, right? Like,
Yep.
the one of my favorite Marvel cards I have in my collection, it's not within arm's reach right now, but is, a PMG, Precious Metal Gems, Venom card. Like, Venom has never been, if you talk about the MCU and what you see on TV or like in the movie theaters, like Venom had his own movie, sure, but he hasn't been, I think Sony has the rights to Venom technically. And so he hasn't been in any of the movies with, Tom Holland, Spider-Man or Iron Man or any of that stuff. So really an offshoot character, but his cards are badass. And people
Totally.
still to this day collect those cards because of appeal and the way that they look. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of fun to the nuance of what someone's interested in. And when it's not an athlete, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, they don't have to go out and perform on Sunday. It's like, do you think this person's cool? And do you like their stuff? And maybe there's other fans as well. And that makes it a lot of fun, I think.
I think that's the best part about Marvel too. And so I also play fantasy football, and like most people do. I play in some pretty deep technical leagues hosted on myfantasyleague.com. And the cool thing is you can like make custom skins for your league page. And so I've ran a home league since 2007. And like 5 years ago, I was like, we need to rebrand our league and get one of these cool skins. And so I was like, we need a theme. And so I put up a vote to all of our league mates. I said, here, like, what theme do we want it to be? Do we want it to be Game of Thrones is popular at the time? Do we want it to be Mario? Like, we picked it. So we landed on Marvel, and we called it, our league is now Guardians of the Gridiron. And my only task to everyone was pick your favorite Marvel character and then generate a team name based off of that. And it's sweet, man. Like, we've got like the biggest expansive list of characters that were selected. And I like find myself like somewhat of a Marvel nerd. Like, I know a lot of them. And this guy comes back to me, he's like, I want to be Puck. And I was like, who? Puck. And so I go and like Google this dude, and like the only thing, he's like showed up in like 3 comics, and there's only 4 images on the internet. So I'm like giving these images to this guy that's designing our site. I still to this day don't know who the hell Puck is. But that is the cool thing about Marvel, is that you can relate to different characters, and then even more so in cards. You know what set really unlocked Marvel for cards was Black Diamond. That was by far.
I remember you opening that too.
So when I just moved from Seattle to Montana in the spring, and I used to keep all of my empty old boxes. I ripped 43 boxes of Marvel Black Diamond. But it was sweet because that stuff was only like $300 a box, which at the time was like super cheap to rip stuff.
Yeah.
But that product itself, I think really kicked Marvel in gear to where it is right now, and brought back a lot of people into the hobby. You had Exquisite, you had the Infinity Stone inlaid cards, you had engraved cards. I have a Thor Exquisite or a Hemsworth that is inscribed. And I don't know, that to me, that release was fantastic. It's what sucked me back into Marvel cards.
You were doing that, and then I was looking at that set and I was like, this doesn't really get me going. But that set getting popular inspired me to actually go out and start buying all the old stuff from when I was a kid and doing massive subs of 1990 Impel.
Okay.
I graded 2 complete sets of 1990 Impel. I mean, one of them did extremely well, and that was great. I graded them at like $12 a card, I think, the entire 162, and those things were great for me. So Marvel has been awesome.
That's what you really need, though, in niche stuff, and not even niche stuff, honestly, in cards in general, is you need a product to gravitate people towards. And then from there, people will find their own lanes to play in.
Which it sounds like you're saying is one of the issues with F1, having them only be so narrow in what they offer. You're not really allowing people the flexibility to go have some fun.
Right. It's either you have to be one or the other. I don't think you can be in between. For me, like if I was running Fanatics decisions based off of what I would do with F1, I would have 2 products. I would have Chrome, I would have Sapphire. That's one, and then I would have Dynasty. I would not have paper. I would not have it. I don't think it's the right decision. It's watered down, and I don't think there's no value there for someone to say like, this is my entry point into it. If you were going to say that F1 is defined by, it is a high-end luxury sport, which it is.
Right. Yep.
then your card should only be high-end and
High-end
luxury
luxury, yeah.
because that is who your customer is. Your customer isn't a 12-year-old kid that's walking into Target with his mom in Alabama. Like it's not. And so you need to play to what your market is. For Fortnite, they would be their Achilles heel if they made another product because you would dilute it. You need to have consolidation to where it's only buying this until a certain point to where the market says, hey, we want more. That's like where WNBA is at right now. Like if you talk to like really, really thick collectors into WNBA, Mooch, etc., it's that, hey, like there is a high-end customer here. We want an NT. We want the flawless. Don't just give me Prism. Because Prism for them is it's a cheap product.
But also I don't want, from what I'm understanding, I don't want Select or Donruss or Opt. Like, don't go that direction. I actually want more, but I want you to go up.
Correct. Yeah, or just something completely different. So the problem with the Chromium cards is they all get lumped together. Prism, Optic, Select, like they all are one and the same. So it's really understanding your market and then like releasing products like based off of that strategy. I think that they've done it right with Fortnite. They haven't done it right with F1. And in sports, we all know that it's diluted as hell, but the customer puts their dollars where it needs to be. And that's why that stuff isn't on shelves and some is.
And it's nice to see that these days that things are sitting on top site if they're not desirable or the price is wrong. And it's not just everyone in their bots coming in and grabbing everything. People are actually being smart with their decision-making and what they're buying. And I do think that that's going to help the market. With that, Nick, I think this is a good spot to end. And since we're coming up on our time, I want to give you an opportunity to just talk about anything from where you sell to where people can find you. If you just want to plug, like, hey, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram, or if you sell somewhere, feel free to let the audience know.
For sure. A couple things. I'm on Twitter, nmartin55. I'm on IG and eBay. It's AD99_collector. But I would say this, if you are going to get in this hobby and your goal is to buy, sell, and then use that to fund collections and substantial collections, you need to be a hound dog. You need to be in every single market, every single lane that you possibly can. And do not be afraid to put in the work to say, I'm going to be on 5 different social media platforms to go look for things and buy things. You will find your way to a buyer if you do that. Likewise, if you are a buyer and if you are after rare stuff and you want to find something that may only exist in one channel, you need to be there. So meet your customers where they are. And if you are a customer, go look everywhere.
Awesome. Well, Nick, thanks again. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. And it was great having you on Good Sellers.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Good Sellers. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along wherever you get your favorite podcasts. To learn more about the hobby and how to sell your cards faster and easier, visit us at stacksales.io. We'll see you next time.